the studio today with Jane Curtis, who's done some research into music in the ancient times, and we mean ancient, really ancient, and find out how music has affected us throughout the years. Jane, welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The topic of ancient music is a surprisingly full topic and a very interesting one, and it's something that all the years you do music and you hear music and you learn about it and so on, you love it, but you don't realize how very far back the basic principles of music go. I mean, they were there, of course, but they were discovered by human beings. The earliest thing really came, I guess, in Mesopotamia, or it's a little bout between Egypt and Mesopotamia, and I mean real written down principles of music,
really wrote
not
it down.
only playing.
Okay.
In China, it goes back very far too, depending on your source, just how far. But there, I thought I'd give you just two little examples of legends or what have you, how they got music.
Okay.
And one is China, the Emperor Huangdi, who lived in the 3rd millennium BC. Everything we do today is going to be BC.
Right.
And Huangdi was the first emperor. He gets the credit for being the first one to have a combined China, so to speak, where all the different little warring kingdoms, or most of them, came together into one country. Well, Huangdi sent out his chief scholar one day to go out and collect some reeds for him. And a reed's, of course, one of the primary sources of making flutes.
Right.
So he sends him out. And why does he do that? Well, it's the beginning of his reign, and he wants a good omen, for us. Everything shaping up, everything coming up roses for him. And there's this bird called the Feng Huang bird, a very special bird. You don't see it very often. You're very lucky if you get a glimpse of it. Same thing, sort of like the unicorn in European backdrop. So it makes a characteristic cry, and this cry can be imitated by using the flute, by using a musical instrument. So the object is then to make a flute and listen to the sound of it and take it from there. Well, as it happens in these flutes, the Chinese were well aware that you had a column of air in there that was vibrating, and if you altered the length, you would get different pitches.
Okay.
So the great big word pitch comes in, and once human beings were aware of pitch, rather than just plucking a bowstring or earlier than that, just listening to animals grunt or call, so he.
Well, isn't the Chinese language the language that uses pitch to change the meaning of a word?
Well, oh yes, indeed they do,
Yeah.
and it can be very, very difficult learning it.
Right.
But if I say, for instance, I am American, I would say 我是美国人, which sounds kind of weird. And occasionally you'll hear in the news where some reporter who also speaks Chinese will pronounce the names correctly, because names have that too. But yes, the whole idea of pitch and what it means, and then of course gradually they were realizing that if you change the length of your air column in there, you were going to get different pitches.
Right.
And once you got different pitches, there was a concept of the scale right there, combining them, chording and so on, were there. So the Chinese say that's how we got music.
Okay.
A combination of this bird and the reeds and the powerful Emperor Huangdi. Some of the other ways it got started were the European ones, and after we go way back to the Neanderthal, and the Neanderthals are believed to have become extinct in around 40,000 BC. And meanwhile, music at that time, there was such a thing, and not quite that far back, but very early. They made some finds in Slovenia and other places in Europe, in caves, which again is significant because people were living in caves, obviously.
Right.
So they found what might be the very oldest musical instrument. And what it was the bone of a cave bear. And it was a big femur, a big leg bone of a bear. And it had holes in it, not just any old jabbing something in, but rounded, equally distant from one another, and nicely rounded off. And this was believed to be the earliest instrument. People disagreed with it, of course, but nobody had a better theory. One theory was that some animal just picked up this bone and chewed on it, but you don't get that. But the point there being that way, way back, people were lifting up some bone
experimenting
like this,
with making their own sounds.
And playing on it, making their own and being able to get given sound at a given time. And of course, very early they understood that what you're doing is making something vibrate. And it might be this column of air, and it might be some surface, like a drum or a membrane. And of course, the other thing is the string. And it was Egypt, the string started mainly in Egypt. And they did have other instruments, but the string really got going there. And the Greeks were famous for that. The Greek Pythagoras came up with his understanding. He figured it out and he understood it. And again, the length of the string, if you divide the string at certain intervals, you're going to get. And they all realized that the octave was not a true, if the octave was true, then after they'd made a scale, if all the parts of the scale were true, the octave would be off.
Right.
They all realized that. And some were deeply disturbed by it because they thought nature is supposed to be perfect.
Oh, okay.
And they were bothered when it began to be proven that our orbit around the sun is not a true circle. But this fell by the wayside because music, I guess, took over and proceeded in its own pace. Now I have a couple of little things from YouTube where they play either original instruments or deliberately produced ones after on the same principles, same dimensions, same materials as much as was possible. So they got on. But let's please, if we could hear those two little clips. And you're going to see some pictures and we'll see some instruments. This is cuneiform. Much of what we found was in that area, in the area that's now Syria and the Levant. And this picture's neither here nor there. But just setting the time and the place. Go on to the next one. Now here's a picture, and you can see from the clothing, those are Mesopotamians at the top, with those long skirts with the fringed bottoms. No, don't go on. Go back to that one, please. Stay on that for just another minute.
Can we? No, back up too.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Well, then just bring something up, please. Whatever is there, bring it up, and
it was an automatic changing, so we couldn't go back.
No, I asked about that. You're supposed to be able to control it. But please just bring up whatever the next picture is, and keep it there.
He doesn't know what you're doing.
Okay, can't do it.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
It's a video, it's not pictures.
Okay.
Okay, go, yes, okay, I understand, yeah. I understand. But we will be looking at, just if you can either start it again or just proceed. That's okay. Yeah. Now these are Mesopotamians. Here's some more. This is what you would find and you would have to decipher and read. And this is part of a document that was deciphered and proved to be about music. And here is somebody playing a harp. This was one type of string, goes back a long way. And you can see the strings are represented. These are some ceremonies and things having to do with music. And one of them down there, now here is a famous lyre called the bullhead lyre, L-Y-R-E. And these were shown all over in pictures. Here's the bullhead, a close-up of the bullhead. And these were some things that were happening in the world at the same time, roughly the same time period. The pyramids
being built.
were going to be built, yes. Pyramids are going to be built in Egypt. There's the Sphinx. And these things are in the middle of the 3rd millennium BC. And here's King Tut, part of King Tut's things. King Tut goes back a few hundred, maybe 1,000 years later. And here's some Egyptians, the same period. They were demonstrating their time and place also. This is a quite important Egyptian one. You see the person there is playing the harp. And this is a god sitting at the top there. And then we'll cut this off now. We'll stop here.
Okay.
And we'll go on. The development of music proceeded in places that we have archaeological, we can trace it because of archaeology. And the main places were Europe, mainly southern Europe, China, and a few in that same region. It did not go back as far in Africa, although there are some things there. And of all places, Ireland. We haven't really said anything about the horns, but if we could look at our pictures, please, not our clip, but our pictures. Here is one in Mesopotamia, and this is a type of instrument that still exists today. You had a little sounding board, and you had the strings, and it shows clearly that they knew how to tune the strings, they knew what the different pitches were, they knew how to make it go up or make it more go down, and they could also carve very nicely on stone. This is a stone one. The next one, please. And here is a lyre. If you've ever wondered what the difference is between a harp and a lyre, you can see it here. The harp was shaped pretty much like our present-day harp, just a triangle shape. But the lyre had it had a firmer bottom usually, but it also had this different shape. Mm-hmm. And you could hold it, or the big ones you could put down on something. And this dates itself. This is again Mesopotamian with the skirts, the fringe skirts that they're wearing. And go to the next one, please. And these are two of them in a museum. And alas, much of this stuff is gone because of the war in Iraq.
Oh, yes.
A lot of this was originally in the museum in Baghdad. But there you have two of the very famous ones. The silver one is the one in the foreground. And the next picture will show us a close-up of the bullhead. And this is not just any old painted on there. The mask for the bull is gold, is solid gold, made in I shouldn't say solid, but it's a sheet of gold. And the color thing there is lapis lazuli or turquoise. They had access to those things, but they had to ship away for them. So again, you see trade comes into the picture. The music shows you that they were in touch with.
This is at that bottom level of the lyre.
That's right, yeah, and then it rises up here. Mm-hmm. And to the next picture, you see the silver lyre, and then you can see the whole one. This had a little animal head on there too. And you can see how it was played. Mm-hmm. It looks much like playing a harp.
Right.
Although the portable ones you had to clear hold up, the way you would a portable harp today. Next one, please. And we're moving on to Greece. And a lot of what we know about music comes from tomb paintings, wall paintings, any kind of painting. But this is one of the pipes, pan pipes being played. And that, you had two of them, both in your mouth at the same time. So they gained some different effects by doing that. The next one is another Greek one. This is a lovely little carving, stone carving of, one next picture. Yeah, this is Apollo. And this is sort of curious instrument here. So they did experiment around and get off the beaten path. They weren't just slavishly bound to certain forms, because this looks more like half a lyre than the other, but an integral part of the of the culture. On to the next one. And these are musicians in Egypt back in the 3rd millennium BC. And you see women a lot playing these instruments, most of them. And the time later we're going to see a picture of the thing that looks like a Swiss horn. You blew it, you held it up here, the shaft went down, and then it bent, and it lay on the ground. It lies on the ground. It makes a very deep tone, a deep, satisfying tone. One more. And this is the seal of an important queen of Ugarit. And Ugarit was a place in the Mediterranean coast part of Syria. Changed its name later. I think it's Ras Shamra. But you can see it was an important feature of court things. Presumably this is the queen, and this is her court musician. And the style of art, you notice, is very different, and that helps to put an exact label on it. But this one goes in, this is 2nd or 3rd millennium, I forgot, BC. And we have, I think, do we have another? Oh yes, we have several more in fact. These are bells. Now the 3rd, you have strings, you have winds, and you have percussion. You have things that you pluck or bow, and you have things that you breathe into, blow into, and you have things that you hit, that you strike. And these were hand bells, and some of those kind of magical tones that you hear. And of course today the music is made up now, but they really had them, and they made that noise, and that's where this comes from. So next time you hear little tinkling noises, you could think of these people thousands of years ago, and it also shows you how well they could work metal. This tells you too that you've gotten beyond the Neanderthals. Next picture. This is another one. That one was from Ireland, by the way. This one is also from Ireland, and it's the end of a horn, and it's beautiful metal work on the end of it. And they had, I think they had mainly the blow into kind of horns, as distinct from the cross flute that you would. And we have another Irish one. And this is more like your hunter's horn, I guess. But this you would hold to your mouth and give it a good blast, and it would go around and come up there. I think that may be the last of the pictures I have there. So now we need to talk a little more about some of the fine points. Students today, of course, learn pretty soon about the circle of fifths and how scales work and the different kinds of scales they are and what they're for. And people who are not into it find it all very mysterious, which it is in a way. And I think it makes it all the more remarkable that these people found this out on their own. Right. I have here a CD that I bought a long time ago. It's called 7 Modes for an Ancient Lyre. And I don't know if this will show up at all if I just hold it, if we can have a look at it. But oh no, it doesn't.
There it is.
There it is. All right. You can see that it has that lovely drawing of a lyre on it, and 7 Modes of an Ancient Lyre. Janet Smith. What does this mean? Well, this means that a lady was studying cuneiform, found some tablets, was shown tablets, one stone in particular that was all full of cuneiform. She translated it. Part of her trade was to understand it, translate it, and it was a music treatise.
Oh.
And there had been such things under the Greeks, of course, and the Greeks had made sense of them, and they had passed them on to the Romans. Romans inherited much culture from the Greeks, and from Persia. There have been some finds in Persia, too, of their instruments. But when Janet Smith translated this thing, an article was written about it, appeared in the newspapers, and another woman, whose last name was Kilmer, you may have heard of Dr. Kilmer, they two got together on this because the one knew this language and the other was a musician through the technical sides of the musician. Eventually, another professor, this was out in California, I think most of it at UC Berkeley, another professor built one. They had the actual dimensions for the silver lyre,
Really?
which we've seen a picture, and they actually built one. And the result of that was, now what does 7 modes mean? Well, it means that they had discovered the scale, and they divided the scale into steps. And these steps were different tones, the result of different either columns of air or strings or surfaces to hit like a drum, and realized what they had there. So I made into scale, logically ranging based on the number of tones or the number of holes in your flute or whatever, a rising or descending scale. This seems mind-blowing today, that people who had no technical anything or
I wonder if the 7 steps in the scale has anything to do with the biblical perfect 7.
It might,
rather than dividing the scale, say, in half tones, as it's done in much of the Oriental music.
well, there are microtones in some music
Right,
too,
right.
where you don't cope with that. But the problem there, the original scales were rather complicated. Very early one, there was a 12-tone scale in this early Mesopotamian, 3rd millennium BC, but they were handled in different ways. And the Chinese for a long time used a 5-tone, a pentatonic, but they also recognized a 12. And an interesting thing, our scale, for example, none of these scales could be divided evenly
Right.
into parts.
Right.
So this caused trouble. But the early folks, now the Chinese scale, and in our scale, if you think of C, D, E, F, G, you have a whole tone, 2 half tones from C to D, same thing from D to E, but E to F is only one of those half tones, so it throws it off.
Right.
Because then as it goes on with the other 4, you have 4 whole tones again, and then a half tone to get back to the start. They recognized an octave. They recognized that the pitch had changed, but you had a related
note.
tone to it. So what they were doing, in all of these things, was adjusting to it. They were now dependent. The reason this says 7 modes, each mode started on a different tone of the scale, and now we think of modal music. We call it modal music because that's what you do. If you have a keyboard and you wipe out the black keys and just play those white keys, you have this modal scale in it, which does not repeat. Now a scaled pattern developed very early too, because you had to be able to temper the scale. If the intervals weren't going to be perfect, but you wanted to work with the octaves, which you really have to do in putting instruments together, you have to arrange them. You have to diddle with them a little bit.
Right.
And you have to take the complementary ones, like the third and the 6th, or the 4th and the 5th, and arrange it. Make something too large, and then its partner is going to be a little small.
Right.
So they knew all that in millennia ago. And in this CD, they used this instrument that was made to the exact dimensions of the old silver lyre. And things on here are called, for instance, Wedding Song, the music class, Twilight on the Water. Now, I don't know if these are based on anything that was in the cuneiform. I don't think so, except that we have one very important thing, the Hurrian hymn, and you have it in 2 forms, going up and coming down. The Hurrians were people who lived in that area at a certain period of history, 2nd and 3rd millennia. There were a lot of local peoples. They lived between the Egyptians on one side, the Mesopotamians to the east, and for a long time then the Hittites to the north. But they were a very vigorous people, apparently. And they have fortune-telling song. That tells you, I remember we talked about how the Mesopotamians were big on fortune-telling.
Right.
And using the stars and everything else. to foretell the future. But you had one on the Liba Maria. This is Al Liba Maria. This is something Assyrian, and Assyrian, of course, was part of the Mesopotamian. But it just seems to be mind-blowing. I would like to look at how much time do we have left?
We have a couple of minutes.
Oh, well, let's go back quickly and play the. We have 2 clips, sounding music.
Okay.
And I'd like to play those, please, if you would play the 2 clips now. They will show you pictures of the instruments, and you will hear sounds. This is a cuneiform tablet. There should be sound coming with this. You can see him playing one of these, tuning and playing. These are lyres, beautifully made. Some are, we have found some original ones, which of course is how they knew what they were like. They did, and not only the pictures. And here's a Greek person playing that Greek. This is another shot of them. Going on at the time.
Okay.
And I think
We just have a few seconds left. So how do you want to wrap this up?
We do. I think we do have another one with sound. Could we put the other one on with sound?
I'm not sure we have time
Number
for it.
2? No?
I don't think we have time for it. Yeah.
All right. All
Okay.
right.
Thank you so much. That's been interesting to explore that.
It's a huge field. I recommend to anybody to tap into it.
And realize that many of the
does.
instruments we play today have their roots.
Really, all of them, except for electronic.
Right.
Every single one you can trace back to
That's
something.
wonderful.